Hi everyone, my name is Henry Morar. This is my senior sem presentation on how the ratios of amino acids and dietary proteins affect organismal physiological outcome. Kind of gives us a deeper look into the science of dietary manipulation for ourselves as well as laboratory animals and all across the animal kingdom. So I should start off by initially saying that macronutrients are well characterized. We know how much each carbohydrate is worth, how much each molecule of fat, each gram of protein is worth. They're very characterized and they've been studied for quite some time. The overall effects of macronutrients are a little bit newer. However, those are well characterized as well. And the intake of calories is also well characterized. So initially, caloric restriction extends lifespan. This is seen across animals. This study was done in Winstar rats, where at any age point, animals that were fed a diet that was lower in calories in general, regardless of where those calories came from, were seen to exhibit a higher percentage of survival at any age point than compared to this in blue is their ad libitum or all you can eat buffet kind of guys, where they were fed as much as they wanted to eat. A little bit less characterized is what these animals are basing their caloric intake on. And when they're fed ad libitum, what macronutrients are they actually being fed, and why do some eat more than the others? So as it turns out, an animal's dietary caloric intake is based on a protein's content in the diet, meaning that when an animal consumes any sort of food, it will continuously eat that food until it gets to a certain protein amount, regardless of the amount of calories it eats. So until an animal gets to its protein target, which is preceding the next slide, but until it gets to that protein target, as we see here, when protein is present in the diet with carbs, an animal can afford to eat less. These in this heat map, red is indicating bad, more calories. That's way too many calories. So what we're seeing here, though, is the bottom line that an animal can afford to eat less because protein's already present in the diet, whereas a diet that doesn't contain any protein, an animal is seen to eat much more. It's seen to eat basically over here, and it's seen to eat much more of the diet because they can't get any protein. So overall, an increase in calories, which is as we already saw, bad for overall longevity. And from this, in 2017, the geometric framework was established, indicating that when an animal has access to a diet that's perfectly balanced to its macronutrient needs, moreover, when the protein content is balanced to its needs, that animal can afford to eat less of the diet and less calories overall. When that animal doesn't have access to a diet like that, or may have access to two supplemental diets, that animal will actually be seen to regulate its eating such that it still gets to its intake target of protein. However, it will eat supplementally from a diet that has an excess in fat to protein and an excess in protein to fat to get to that intake target. So it's not as much based on calories as it is based on the amount of protein in a diet. This also posits that when an animal doesn't have access to any other diet besides a ratio of macronutrients such that proteins on the lower end and fats or carbohydrates are on the higher end, that animal, no matter what detrimental effects on longevity, will overconsume calories in general to get to that protein intake target. And from this, we can kind of look at, well, what are the physiological roles of each macronutrient? What is each one doing for longevity? As it turns out, diets high in carbohydrates are seen to extend lifespan. Diets high in protein are seen to decrease lifespan, not as greatly, though, to the degree as high fat diets, which we'll later on see is there's no biological exchange for a diet high in fat. There's no reproductive exchange, no biological trade-off. In high protein diets, however, there is a biological trade-off, whereas you may see a decrease in longevity. These animals are also seen to experience an increase in biological reproductive output, as we'll see in the next few slides. This can be for a number of reasons, though. A few could be that carbohydrates and fat can be stored in the body and can be remobilized during times of starvation or times of caloric deficit. Proteins, on the other hand, as soon as they're ingested in the body, are broken down in the stomach and small intestine, broken down to their individual amino acids, and then reabsorbed but have to be used immediately. There's not a ton of amino acids circulating throughout our bodies or in our digestive systems at any moment of time. When these amino acids are reconstituted, they're reconstituted in the protein or amino acid quantities or ratios that are seen in enzymes or scaffolding proteins or peptide hormones, whatever body hormones we have and need at that moment or that our body needs to make. So this biological trade-off is indicative of reproductive success. So while we know now that intaking too much protein can lead to a decrease in longevity, we also see that animals that don't have protein in their diet are seen to decrease their sexual display behavior, as well as decrease the onset of it. So in contrast, animals fed a protein containing diet will exhibit a higher sexual display behavior earlier on and to a greater extent than their protein deprived counterparts. But this isn't just seen in this example in male Caribbean fruit flies. This is also seen across the animal kingdom in all mammals, all families of metazoan animals. This study was done in female beetles, where a diet high in CK stands for cockroach, but for all intensive purposes, it's a diet high in protein, is seen to increase the overall ovarian size. This is ovarian size in millimeters of the female beetle, which is indicative of future reproductive success of that individual female. A diet high in carbohydrates is seen to increase the ovarian size, not to the same degree though as proteins. And fats, as we talked about earlier, are seen to decrease it or at least keep it at baseline from what a beetle would normally exhibit under normal conditions. So why is this? Well, as it turns out, amino acids from these proteins are stimulating this mTOR pathway, this mammalian target of rapamycin pathway. And while the name is a little bit misleading because this pathway is present in not only mammals, but all animals, they just call it the TOR pathway. So in general, leucine, mostly out of all amino acids, stimulates this mTOR pathway, which down the line, the overall takeaway from it is that there's a significant increase in protein translation when leucine is present in the body from extracellular and then to intracellular. It should also be noted, though, that growth factors and insulin should also exhibit positive effects on this mTOR pathway. However, not to the same degree, as we can see here by this bolded arrow and by this shorter, thinner arrow. We can see, though, that carbohydrates may, through some secondary processes, stimulate this mTOR pathway, but it's absolutely mainly this amino acid and mostly leucine that stimulates this pathway, that stimulates protein translation. And what should also be mentioned that mTOR does is it inhibits your cellular autophagy, which gives us a reasoning why animals fed high protein diets are seen to have a decreased lifespan, because the cellular autophagy in turn is a cellular recycling, where cells start, in giving it humanistic features, cells start worrying about their own constituents more than about making more proteins. But this isn't just seen with leucine, and leucine isn't the only amino acid that exhibits these effects. Leucine also, though, however, is seen to inhibit the hypothalamic hunger hormone neuropeptide Y, which decreases food intake over a 4-hour and 24-hour period, and then decrease the 24-hour weight change of mice. But leucine isn't the only amino acid. There's 20 amino acids, non-essential, 11 non-essential, and they all do something different. For example, tryptophan is a precursor to serotonin. Lysine, there was a great lysine fixing conspiracy because farmers, and I believe it was the 1980s, were using lysine to increase their livestock's overall mass and size, but there was some sort of conspiracy along with that. Another one is glutamate, which is a taste active amino acid. It gives the umami taste so that we can taste umami. And the greater and an even more important role of glutamate is its role as an excitatory neurotransmitter. So all these amino acids fit into our body. However, it's the ratio of them. I forgot who said it, that it's the dose that makes the poison. So what we can see here then are species specific designer diets. So what does this mean? This is taking an organism, one species specific organism, and running mRNA sequencing on it. And from that, you can tell which amino acids, or which proteins for this matter, which proteins are in the highest demand, are in the highest demand. And then you can sequence which amino acids make those proteins. And so that's exactly what Ma et al. Did in 2020, where they fed a diet. I guess you can look at it sort of as cannibalism, just with the proteins, because it's an artificial diet just with the same amino acids as would be found in the body of a fly. So they fed them these artificial diets just with adding the amino acids and the ratios that are found in the body. And so what is seen is these animals are seen to eat less of the diet, indicating that they are going to have less calories overall, which is good for longevity, less calories. But they're also seen to have an increased index of reproduction when compared to their mismatch. This is just a computer generated ratio of amino acids, such that the calories in both these diets, and the fly amino acid and the mismatch amino acid diet, the ratios of amino acids are different. However, the total molecular weight of the protein in the diet is all the same. But what's seen here is that these animals in the mismatch are seen to intake much more of their diet to get an index of reproduction that isn't anywhere near what these flies that were fed the exome matched amino acid diets were experiencing. However, these findings aren't just limited to fruit flies. This is also seen in mammals and all metazoan animals, where in this study in Piper et al. In 2017, they found that feeding a mouse under the same conditions, but with a mouse's own protein exome balanced diet, the mouse was seen to have an increase in lean mass and an increase in fat mass, which indicates that there's most likely just an overall body increase, which exerts biological effects probably towards the environment and space and sort of reproductive success a bigger animal can exert more will on others, is what I'm gathering from this. The water intake is also less in these mice that have access to an amino acid balanced diet in regards to their own protein exome. And the urinary nitrogen excretion is also less, indicating that these mice had to excrete less nitrogenous waste, which indicates that they were most likely, while the amount of diet wasn't measured here, overall, though, it can be inferred that there was less nitrogenous waste, they were eating less of the diet, as compared to animals that were fed amino acids balanced to casein, which is a protein found in cow's milk, which is completely different. Overall, though, there was also an increase in cortical bone thickness, trabecular bone density and thickness in these mice that consumed the mouse AA, the protein exome match diets. So what are the implications in our society? Well, to start, the human body exome is probably already synthesized. However, species specific diet to humans, where we generalize all the proteins that we make, may be a little bit hard, because humans make you name it, how many more times proteins we make as compared to a fly. So, in the different ones that we make. So what down the line that we can do is kind of take this research and say, well, we know that leucine, for example, and other branched amino acids, they stimulate the mTOR pathway. So an athlete wanting to increase their size and performance may want to increase the amount of branching amino acids or leucine in the diet. Whereas a community with more elderly people seeking to delay aging processes may opt for diets that are higher in glycine, which are seen to exhibit slightly neuroprotective effects in neurocognitive protective effects on the organism. There's also agricultural applications. As we talked about, there was the lysine fixing conspiracy where to increase the overall livestock mass. But there's also different applications for that different from these as well. There's agricultural in terms of plants and what we put into the plant food and what we feed to plants, because plants may also exhibit this. I have yet to see a lot of research on how plants use amino acids, but I'm sure that there are similar applications to this if I dig deep enough. But overall, thank you, and I'd like to thank Dr. Hatley, Eastern Leopard Grasshoppers, and these are my resources. So thank you.